Today we're going to be looking at some of the Elite Space Marine points changes from the new edition. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we've been looking at the changes in 9th edition as they've been coming out. The other day we had quite a lot of Space Marine points changes leaks from what looked like at least a fairly reliable source, as it appeared to be a copy of points changes for a playtester. We can't say absolutely 100% these changes will be the final changes when Games Workshop does release this new chapter approved book, but I think that we could assume that they're not going to be too far off. Unfortunately, it isn't a complete points list by any means. It's only the unit costs and the ranged weapons. We don't have any of the other equipment or melee weapons at all. So with that in mind, I thought we'd go through the codex in a few sections and look at some of the percentage changes for some of the various units. As we don't have any of the melee points, I thought we'd start with the troops section, as the vast majority of the weapons that the troops are equipped with are ranged weapons. So in this video we'll take a look at the various different troops choices, what went up, what went down, what sort of percentage they changed, then take a look at the heavy weapons and the special weapons to see how they might impact squad construction. Let's get into it. So first up we had the intercessors, which we already knew the change of. They were going from 17 to 20 points. It was interesting to note that their auto bolt rifle is now 0 points as well, so you can now just freely choose between any of them. In general, it is looking like the intercessor points change is about par for the course for points increases across the Space Marine decks at least. Typically I'd say about 10 to 20 points increase is around about the average for units going up. Some have gone up far more and some have gone down in points cost, obviously if these points changes are to be believed. No word on their grenade launcher or equipment yet, that will come later I assume, but I do quite like the change to the auto bolt rifle. It was already certainly one of my favourites when combined with combat doctrines, and now it's a further incentive to take it. With a fairly average points cost, I don't think intercessors have changed too much going into the new edition. Tactical squads however have gone up a fair bit more in terms of a point per model basis. They've gone from 12 points to 15 points, which is quite a lot of a bigger jump. The same points cost, but because they're cheaper it's a much bigger percentage jump, meaning that they have fallen behind the intercessors a bit by this measure. There is at least a little bit of give and take to this though, as the heavy weapons have generally gone down across the board, and the special weapons have generally dropped as well, which we'll get onto after this slide. In general though, if you're not taking heavy or special weapons, then the tactical marines aren't really looking quite as hot as they were before against the other troop choices. Scouts have also seen a very hefty percentage increase. They've jumped from 11 to 14 points, going up 3, and overall increases are around about 27%. They do remain the cheapest troops choice out of the lot though, and marine players will still be able to fill up a troop slot for 70 points in 9th edition. And to be honest, while I think this will affect them, I'm not sure how much. As well as being cheap, which they still are comparatively, scouts were generally taken for their ability to set up outside of their deployment zone, and the additional screening and objective capturing abilities that gives them does give them an advantage over other things. I feel like this change has made the gap narrow a fair bit between them and infiltrators and incursors, but despite a fairly hefty points bump, I think that the scouts will still be taken. Their sniper rifle is still the same points cost, though we don't know about the camo cloak yet. With the lowest relative points increases on the board though, the infiltrators and incursors have only gone up 2 points each. As they're already fairly expensive in themselves, that's a very low percentage increase, going up 9 or 10%, and by comparison this does make them look quite a lot more attractive. Still, in terms of a raw damage dealing and durability basis, the intercessors will generally be better, but naturally setting up outside of your deployment zone with the scouts is really quite a big advantage. Now incursors are literally only 1 point more than intercessors. I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if some lists go to taking them instead. They're very durable compared with scouts, and their guns do have some interesting advantages, and their paired combat knives can also pack a decent punch in close combat. I think with this buff they might be finding their niche in between scouts and intercessors. The infiltrators are still a decent amount more. I still maintain that while their guns do have an interesting special rule, the main reason that you want to buy these are for that massive 12-inch deep strike blocking bubble. If it's worth it to have that in your army to screen out some enemy reserves coming in, then the infiltrators aren't a bad pickup. And again, relative to other choices such as intercessors or scouts, they've certainly gone up a lot less in terms of percentage changes, and are looking more viable as a result. Their Helix Adept is now only 34 points from 32, so again is a slightly better relative pick comparatively. I'm still not sure he's worth it in a more competitive setting though. Finally, we know that we have the Assault Intercessors as well, and their points cost has already been leaked at 19 points including gear. They are going to be the cheapest Primaris troops choice, but whether or not that's worth giving up the longer range bolt rifle for really is a little bit questionable to me. It seems from other leaks on the internet that their Astartes chainsword is AP-1 and no other benefits, so obviously they're a bit more attractive with the more combat orientated chapters such as Space Wolves, White Scars, Blood Angels and the like. Overall, just from the base points cost, I'd say that the troops choices have got even more balance than they already were. We tend to see a lot of scouts and not a lot of incursors and infiltrators in my experience, and now we'll be seeing a few less scouts and a few more of the others. The biggest losers in terms of seeing play I think are the Tactical Marines, I'm afraid, unless you are planning on using them as heavy weapon caddies, as we'll see now. So here are the points costs for the various different heavy weapons as they've changed in the new edition. It seems Games Workshop have split the cost for each heavy weapon in the Space Marine decks, at least the ones that can be taken both by infantry and tanks, with the infantry paying less for the heavy weapons because they still suffer that move and shoot firing penalty that the vehicles and bikes and things don't. For example, we'll start off with the Grav Cannon, which used to be 20 points, and now it's 10 points on infantry or 15 points on vehicles, so it's had a whopping 10 points drop on Tactical Marines. Even when you add the 3 points increased cost to the Space Marine who's carrying it, then it is going to be cheaper than before. And it is going to be particularly noticeable for Grav Cannon Devastators, who have got a whopping minus 22% points change. Frankly, Grav Cannon Devastators were already really good. You could throw them in a pod and auto-delete pretty much one thing with that graphitic amplification stratagem, and now that strategy just got even cheaper when most points cost in the game went up. It was already a good strategy, and it seems to have got even better on Devastators now. Incidentally, Devastators in the new edition have gone up from 13 points to 15, so are basically the same cost as Tactical Marines. Next up, and quite underwhelmingly, is the Heavy Bolter, which hasn't changed in points for infantry, but it's gone up 5 points on tanks. Not 100% sure why this one got so much less of a buff than some of the other heavy weapon types. Basically it means that a Marine with a Heavy Bolter has gone up about the standard amount for these points increases across the board, about 13% increase, jumping from 22 to 25. I think out of the heavy weapon list, Heavy Bolters just aren't looking very attractive now. Plasma cannons have dropped from 16 to 15 points on Space Marines. The heavy plasma cannons on vehicles are 20 now. Once factoring in the points cost of the Marine, they've had a 7% points increase, which to be honest I think is still very, very decent indeed. It's decently lower than average, and we know that the plasma cannons have acquired the blast special rule now, which means they should be automatically getting 3 shots against any 6 strong infantry or more. I already quite liked plasma cannon Devastators, and now it just seems that the plasma cannon became an even more viable choice both there and in the tactical squad. Las cannons have also come down in points significantly. They'd cost you 25 points each now they cost you just 15 on a tactical marine or 20 on a vehicle. On your infantry they have come down almost as much as the Grav Cannon, a whopping 7 points less than they used to be, or minus 19%. A minimum sized tat squad with the Las Cannon has increased in points very slightly, but it compares very favourably compared with the various other options in terms of changes overall. I'd very strongly consider a Las Cannon tactical marine squad as an option for a troop's choice in gun lines, particularly if you're running something like Salamanders or Master Artisans, so you get some very nice rerolls on the Las Cannon. 5 Marines with a Las Cannon in 8th would have cost you 85 points, and now it only costs you 90. Missile launchers have similarly come down a little bit. They've stayed the same at 20 points for vehicles, but have dropped to 15 on infantry. They're now interestingly enough the same price as a Las Cannon, which is a little bit weird in terms of having a much weaker anti-tank shot, but I guess their frag shot did gain the blast special rule, so maybe that's trying to account for that. Being able to automatically put out 6 strength 4 shots against big hordes really isn't a bad ability to have, and certainly makes frag missiles more relevant. Again, compared with previously, including the cost of the Marine, they've actually gone down in points. Again, not bad seeing as most of the game has gone up. Finally, we come on to the multi-melter, which has jumped from either 22 points before to either 20 or 25 points after, meaning a Marine with a multi-melter has gone up just 3%. Again, quite decent compared with the field. Honestly, on Space Marines, I really don't see why you'd take a multi-melter when you could take a Las Cannon for 5 points less. It's longer range and higher strength, even though it does lack the melter rule. Barring any other changes that we don't know about, or unless you're playing Salamanders, I still think that the multi-melter compares particularly poorly with the Las Cannon. Finally, moving on to combi weapons, pistols and special weapons. In general, most of these have come down across the board, or at least stayed the same. The Flame has dropped down from 6 to 5 points, the Grav Gun has stayed at 10, the Melter Gun has gone from 14 to 10, and the Plasma has dropped from 11 to 10. I don't know if they were just trying to simplify some points cost here, but having Grav, Melter and Plasma all at 10 does seem a little bit strange. I think it's kind of fair enough between the Melter and the Plasma now. They're a bit more balanced than they were before, and there's a solid reason to take either. The Grav just really doesn't compete though in its current incarnation. I frankly didn't think it was even particularly worth taking before they changed it to this, and now obviously the Plasma and Melter are just so much better. It seems though that combi weapons now kind of outcompete special weapons on the whole. The combi Melter, Flamer, Grav and Plasma all appear to have gone to 10 points. These are pretty decent drops for the Melter, Grav and Plasma, but the Flamer has gone up a little bit. Basically it does mean that all things being equal, aside from the Flamer, it's usually going to be better to take the combi version of a special weapon if you can. Basically you can still opt to fire the Melter, Grav or Plasma all on its own, and you also get the option of firing both if it makes more sense. So honestly, in tactical squads and things, I do see people taking these combi weapons before they take the special weapons now. The combi Flamer is a little bit more complicated because you don't suffer the -1 to hit penalty on the Flamer for firing both types. so it does kind of have a small advantage all of its own. For me though, the Combi Melter and Combi Plasma are looking the best out of the Combi weapons now. Finally, we come on to the Storm Bolter and pistols. I'm sorry to say that my beloved Storm Bolters have gone up by 1 point, although I still think they're very solidly worth considering compared with other options. You're still basically getting the entire firepower of another Space Marine just for the 3-point upgrade, and I still call them pretty much an auto-include if you are running a bare bones squad. Plasma pistols remain solid at 5 points. We have seen in some of the new rules leaks. In some of the leaks from the Indomitus box datasheets, we have seen that the plasma pistols only overcharge on unmodified ones now, which in general is a bit of a positive for them, as it means that negative to hit modifiers won't make them blow up easier. It does remain to be seen exactly how fast they roll out that change though, and whether or not they're actually going to take the step of hot fixing everything in the FAQ as 9th drops. Hand Flamers have risen from 1 point to 5 points. I don't think that they're going to be worth taking anymore, I'm afraid. And Grav Pistols have dropped from 8 points to 5 points, which for me still isn't good enough to compete with the Plasma or the Storm Bolter. So overall, I'm a big fan of this change to the troops' choice of Space Marines for the most part. I think the only real big losers are bare bones tactical squads that weren't taking any heavy or special weapons. Scouts have been nerfed a fair bit, but they were arguably one of the best troops choices anyway in my opinion, and the ones that I would have argued were a bit weaker, the Incursors and the Infiltrators, have got a relative buff compared with the field. If you are taking tactical squads, then heavy weapons are more viable than ever, and we might see things like melter guns being taken a bit again, as they have taken a radical points drop. So let me know what you think of the changes. Will this change how you're fielding your Space Marine troops? And we'll be hopefully continuing with this series and looking at some of the other Space Marine slots in the near future. Maybe a video on the various fast attack choices next, where we've got the Inceptors going down by quite a bit. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for more 40k news as it comes out. And if you have been enjoying these videos, then any support on the channel's Patreon page is certainly appreciated. They do take quite a long time to make, and it is basically my full-time job now. If you would like to support, then channel Patreons get a few other advantages, such as being able to see videos early on the channel, regular opinion polls to see what sort of videos I make next for the channel, and also entry into the Auspex Tactics prize draw, where at the start of August I'll be giving away 3 copies of the Indomitus box set. If any of that sounds good, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.